Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sirhan on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 2nd of April 2025. Windy day here in Cincinnati with strong winds, and of course, the ongoing rain that's supposed to take place from some point tonight through the weekend. Hope everybody in Cincinnati is taking extra precautions to stay safe and be warm out there because it is going to be a crazy next couple of days here with all this rain and with all the winds that came through. And hopefully everyone is safe and sound in their particular houses and wherever it is you're at. Limit travel if it's possible because it's supposed to be really crazy over the next few days. But if you do have to travel, use extra precautions because that's what I'm going to do. Maybe other parts of the country and the world as well, but I can only speak for the part I live in because it's what my two eyes see. But whatever it is, take extra precautions if necessary. I hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Just go ahead and get right down to it. Lots to cover tonight. For those who missed me earlier, I had my show, The Fight Series, about the great Pernell Whitaker. It has been reposted on the X platform. You guys are more than welcome to listen to that as I divulge into some other sports topics today and some other historical moments in the sports. Of course, with it being the off season, it's always going to be talk about the NFL rules changes. The ones that did pass, the first one was the wild one, which I don't know where this is going to get to, moving kickoffs to the 35-yard line if a kickoff goes to a touchback. Started out from the 20. It started off, now it's going to the 25. Then it got to the 30. And now we're here at the 35. So what's going to be next? Are we going to have a kickoff start at midfield? Because this is gotten the definition of silly. If you think this is going to set up more kick returns, you have another thing coming because there's still kickers with legs strong enough to boot the ball out of the end zone for the touchback. And I don't know how you're going to discourage kickers to not kick it out of the end zone. What's going to be next? Are they have to kick it out of bounds? Because if you kick it out of bounds, it's going to go to the 40-yard line, and that's essentially a 5-yard difference. I'm going to read this here. What's up, Adam Boxing Show? Hope you're doing good out there. Shout out to you. You always have good boxing stuff. But back to this particular rule, what it's going to be weird is I don't know how this is going to transpire and work because the NFL always has this propensity of trying to fix stuff that it isn't broke. And it seemed like the kickoff was fine. Then they went to that dynamic thing they do in the XFL, which didn't turn out to be all that great because there's still kickoffs going into the end zone. They think going to the 35 is going to change that. And that's not going to happen because there's still going to be kicks going out of the end zone. They're still going to be starting at the 35. At some point, maybe they'll just eliminate kickoffs because I guess this is where it's going to be headed toward. So we'll see. It's one of the silliest ones. And some of these rule changes sometimes get more and more sillier. For them to go from the 20 to the 25 to the 30 to the 35 on a kickoff, on a touchback. And let me remind you, if they kick it out of bounds, you start at the 40. What are they going to do with that next? Start at midfield? And basically now you're talking about one pass play. And you're basically already in red zone territory just about if it's connected correctly or you draw a pass interference or a defensive penalty. That's just really a silly one that passed, and I don't know where that one's going to get to. We'll just wait till the games to start on that one. But probably the best one that passed was probably the overtime rules. Both teams have a possession, 10 minutes. I like it. I wish they would have gone to 15, but I'd be fine with 10. Just give each team one possession, and after that one possession, go to sudden death. And I think it's the right thing to do. It stops all the bickering, especially from those in Buffalo and Cincinnati who bicker about everything when it comes to the NFL rules. Now they have no room to bicker because now they got what they wanted. It's up to them now to go ahead and actually deliver results. I actually like this rule because both teams can get one chance to score a field goal or a touchdown, one possession each. After that, all bets are off. Sudden death. Whoever gets the last possession wins. That rule I like. That rule I think turns out to be the right rule and the smart rule. especially what they do in the NFL playoffs. I mean, they should have done it for both the regular season and the playoffs instead of just limiting it to the playoffs originally, because it caused all kinds of chaos and confusion and a lot of bickering from Buffalo and Cincinnati. But they're getting what they wanted. Good rule change that passed. Shout out to that. And of course, they tabled the tush push. Everybody knows what the story with the tush push is with the Philadelphia Eagles. I've always said with this particular rule, if the defenses can't slow it down, you get what you ask for in the end. I get the general concept of why they want it banned, because supposedly it's not a football play or whatever they want to call it. But it seemed like they're trying to absolve defenses from finding ways to stop the tush push from happening. You want to stop the tush push? You have 10 yards to go from one marker to the other marker for a first down. Don't let them get 10 yards, or don't let them get 9.5 yards so they can use that play and get you on a first down on a QB sneak or QB push or whatever you want to call it. It's 10 yards. Defense has to be able to stop it. If they can't stop them on those 10 yards, they get what they deserve at the end of the day. I mean, and of course, we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the better offensive lines in the NFL, and the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. So if they want to go ahead and ban that play, have at it. But don't think for 1 second the Philadelphia Eagles have another plan if they do, because they have the personnel for it. And of course, the standout running back, Saquon Barkley. So if they want to ban it, have at it. But don't think that's going to stop the Eagles from doing anything on offense, because they're going to find ways to work around it. They have the personnel for it. And there are going to be people whining about it per usual. Everybody whines about everything with the NFL rules these days. And of course, the other one is the continuation of replay assists. It worked last year. I expect it to continue. Looks like they're starting to finally evolve after all these years. It basically is about getting the calls right, and the replay assist is going to help out. And of course, now they have the supposed electronic device or whatever for the first down markers, and using the so-called chain gain as a second option, just in case the first option they can't get a conclusive result. That's fine, because that way the people in Buffalo and Cincinnati can stop their yapping about getting screwed by the Chiefs and the referees. You guys know the story there. Last year, it was the AFC title game between Kansas and Buffalo. The fourth down play where Josh Allen supposedly got a first down when he really didn't. Replays confirmed it. Now they have no room to gripe. They got what they wanted. And if they can't beat Kansas City in this year's playoffs, which is probably going to happen again, they're going to have no room to gripe, or they're going to find something else wrong, because that's the way they are in Buffalo. And of course, we know how Cincinnati is with their fans. They cry when they wake up in the morning because of Cincinnati Bengals fans. But some of the rules changes, I like the 35-yard start after a touchback is just silly. Of course, the tush push, as everybody knows, is always going to be up for debate. They tabled it. Actually, if I'm the Philadelphia Eagles, I push to have a ruling done right now and have them make a decision on it. Simply put, so they can make their adjustments on the fly. And let's see who really is for it, who really is against it. They really need to push it and get it done this year and just be done with it, instead of just pushing aside for down the road. And of course, one of them that didn't pass, was not a surprise to me, was when the Detroit Lions made this rule change about not an automatic first down on a defensive holding or illegal contact. The rule, of course, is you can't impede a receiver beyond 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. You can't put your hands on him, or you can't touch him. It's a bit of a tricky rule. I understand the Lions' gripe on it, but I'm not surprised it didn't pass, because I thought there needs to be more details and clarity on that one. I understand it. I get it. But I know it wasn't going to pass. Just maybe, I guess they're trying to say, is let the defense play ball a little bit, which is something everyone has been complaining about for the last almost 2 decades, since the turn of the century. Because we know the rules are structured for NFL offenses as it is right now. And that's why you see scores all over the place. And that's why teams are putting up crazy numbers at a historical pace, especially on the offensive side. Time to let the defenses play a little bit, maybe more than what they are, because I think they're playing enough. but they need to be able to do a little more than what the NFL has structured them to be at. And I'll tell you this, the NFL is going to continue to find ways to make things act the old proverbial, fix something that isn't broke, because they're always going to rely on one play that just goes across the national media, and they're going to have a knee-jerk reaction on it. Let's see, I got a comment here. How the Bengals getting on this? I'm going to touch on the Bengals here in a minute, my guy. Give me a second. So, but that's what I had to say about all the NFL rules changes. We talk about more of those because, the NFL always wants to do something their own way. And now they're talking about playing a game in all places, the United Arab Emirates. I mean, it's bad enough that international play's gone to many countries. I get it. They want to globalize the product. That's how you talk about globalizing your product. I get it. But the international thing has gone a little bit too far, in my opinion. Now you're talking about playing a game with the United Arab Emirates in the middle of the Middle East. Let's see how that one goes. The only team I could probably see playing there is Buffalo, given the comments that Sean McDermott made in the 9/11 reference a couple years ago. That's probably the perfect fit for that particular country because of what Sean McDermott said a couple years ago. You guys can read the comments on this one. Money's in Dubai, though, in that UAE. I gotta check that out. I'll admit, I gotta check it out. I'll research that one. Thank you for that one. So it takes care of the NFL rules part of it. Now I'm going to talk about some NFL content a little bit, especially the two teams in Ohio. Well, let's start with what took place this morning on the Pat McAfee show. And let's say a stem for what took place yesterday here in Cincinnati. It's the standoff between Bengals ownership and stud defensive end Trey Hendrickson. Everybody knows the story here. They're trying to get in a new contract. The Bengals front office and Trey Hendrickson as agent are at a standstill in terms of dollars. Bengals front office allowed Trey Hendrickson to seek a trade. Apparently, they tried to get a first-round pick out of it, which I said was a little bit too steep for a guy who's 30 years old and is in the last year of his contract, because somebody would have to pay him and give up a draft pick as a result, and no team was going to do that. And now yesterday, I guess Katie Blackburn, who one of the ones that runs the operations, was interviewed by some idiotic character called Ben Baby. This character called Ben Baby, who's one of the reasons why the Bengals are where they are right now, decided to ask Blackburn about the status of Trey Hendrickson. And Blackburn, in his own weird way, basically saying he just got to be satisfied with what he has, because we respect everything Trey Hendrickson has done for the Cincinnati Bengals since they signed him in 2020. Fast forward to today. Hendrickson goes on the Pat McAfee show, and the comments were read to him. And the word respect, it was something that Trey Hendrickson basically responded to, saying that's something he does not take too kindly, because it now turns out there's been no real communication or no fluid communication between the Bengals and the people with Trey Hendrickson. We know what the Bengals narrative was in the offseason from the Bengals fans, the Bengals super fans, all the media people here, and the content creators all over the social media world. They wanted Jamar Chase and T. Higgins extended. They got it. But they didn't see the big picture real well at all, because that's something I've been trying to tell them since last season. And, of course, they're more blind than Stevie Wonder at this point because they don't see it straight. Because now you're at an influx. You got all the contracts signed, and it seemed like the Bengals front office has decided to take a vacation, which I said they should have handled Trey Hendrickson before they got to the contracts of Chase and Higgins, because Hendrickson is on his final year, and you had Chase and Higgins still locked up, and you could negotiate with them anytime. But it was, again, another case of the Bengals front office and its fans, super fans, and the media people mismanaging the offseason for a third straight season. And you're fixing to have a defense that might be even worse this year than it was last year. And everybody here in Cincinnati knows how historically bad that was last season. Now, we're in 2025 now, and we're still having talks about mismanagement of communication between players and the ownership when it comes to the sports here in Cincinnati, especially when it comes to the Bengals. And it's been something that's been a topic of conversation ever since the Browns took over in 1991. I mean, here we are 34 years later, multiple lines of communication, every which way possible, all kinds of messaging apps, all kinds of texts, all kinds of whatever you want to call it. But now we're still having the same problems now that there was when the new ownership took over in 1990, and it's a walking disgrace. And it starts from the top all the way down. I can point to many, many more reasons why it's happening. But it seemed like the Bengals front office just said, we're going to pay Chase Higgins and Mike Gesicki, and the offseason is done. Apparently, they forgot that there's holes in that roster, and they're going to rely on the draft. Remember, they gave up a late round draft pick to pick up a fourth-string running back named Khalil Herbert in midseason for no real reason at all. And Khalil Herbert now is in Indianapolis. And that turned out to be a backfire. So they're going to have to find a way to go outside the box to fill whatever holes they need, because they still don't have an offensive line to protect Joe Burrow, which is for the sixth season a massive red flag issue that refuses to be addressed. Actually, they blew that when they were stupid enough to sign Orlando Brown Jr. to that dumb contract that has Chiefs and Ravens fans laughing at that organization all over the place. And on top of that, you need to totally revamp that defense, because your secondary is basically the same as last year. The only difference is you don't have Von Bell back, but he was a walking corpse anyways. You're going to bring Dax Hill and DJ Turner back from ACL injuries. You know how that's going to turn up. And you basically have the same roster this year that you had last year on the defensive side. I know the defense probably needs to be rebuilt anyways, but you're going about it the wrong way, because your draft history, for the most part, outside of drafting Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, has been basically mediocre at best, and that's being generous. You're going to have to really get creative and think outside the box, especially when it comes to the Bengals fans and the Bengals super fans and the media people who want to involve themselves in this. You guys are the reason all of this has happened over the last 3 years. Don't absolve yourself from accountability, because I'm coming after you. I said all along, somebody needs to hold you guys accountable, and you're looking at the guy that's going to do it. Get the offseason done. Get it right. If you guys want to be in that same conversation as Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City, fix the right things. Fix it right. Get the offseason going the right way. Get going the right way, or just flat out vanish, because it's a tiresome act. You guys don't get it. You guys are more blind than Stevie Wonder, and that's why what's happened is happening so far. And I said this from the get-go. I want to see something, at least an attempt to try and put a competitive product out here so everybody can just simply zip it. But as I said all along, once you sign Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins to those contracts, you're talking about close to $600 million to all three. You better find ways to generate Super Bowls, or it's going to be a bigger failure than Enron was. And everybody in the States knows just how bad of a business failure Enron was. The Bengals are going to be in that category if you get nothing out of this. Seems like here we are in 2025, and I have to tell people how to manage a business. Crazy. Speaking of bad management, let's go northeastern Ohio. The other day, it was Jimmy Haslem, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, saying something that I've been telling everybody for 3 years, among many others. He basically admitted that the Deshaun Watson trade was a swing and a miss. And the problem was, we told them 3 years ago when they made that trade, now probably the worst trade in sports history, at least in NFL history, when they forked out all that draft picks and got the fully guaranteed contract to Deshaun Watson. We told him it was going to happen, because this guy checked out in 2019 when he got ramrodded by Kansas City in the divisional playoffs after being spotted a 24-point lead, and he just quit. And he's basically checked out ever since. Of course, he sits out the entire 2021 season because he didn't want to play another down for Houston. That's when all of the allegations came up. You know the story there. The trade happens, and the rest is history. I've reached to this conclusion because I got a chance to see this entire list of the Cleveland Browns quarterbacks that have ever come through that team. Maybe do two things. Don't invest in any quarterbacks anymore, free agency, trade, or draft. And maybe have a quarterback-less roster and see what it does. Because every quarterback you bring in that team isn't the definition of an intentional failure. And it seems like Cleveland Browns fans have a sick obsession of wanting quarterbacks in that roster because they want to see a failure. How about going for a season with a quarterback-less offense and see what that gets you? Because you might actually do something if you do. Because any quarterback that goes on that Cleveland Browns is basically the definition of subtraction by addition. Because every time they go to the Cleveland Browns, that offense just takes steps backward. And you're basically an embarrassment when it comes to the quarterback position in the NFL. They always talk about for years past, Vikings careers go back to die. Maybe you could say the Browns quarterbacks were careers set to be a net negative because any quarterback that goes to Cleveland has been a net negative ever since they go there. And it happened here again with the Deshaun Watson. The only thing remotely close he had a positive was getting Joe Flacco off the couch to go to the playoffs in 2023. But that turned out to be a backfire because they got ramrodded by Houston in the playoffs. And basically, and not being able to re-sign him shows the incompetence of the Cleveland Browns front office, which is every bit as incompetent as the Cincinnati Bengals front office. And that is saying a whole lot. I thought the Bengals were around. I play right here. Sir, the accountability officer. You're darn right. Oh, yes. There has to be one. There has to be an accountability officer, and you're looking at him. But you guys in Northeastern Ohio, I never thought I'd live to see the day where I would say out loud, there's an NFL organization that runs worse than the Bengals. The Browns are now finding their ways to do it. With the way they managed the Deshaun Watson trade, that basically was all she wrote. Because you had a quarterback at Baker Mayfield, and you threw him under the bus publicly. Publicly. The Browns organization on their X platform, when they announced they're going to pursue Deshaun Watson, did it openly and publicly so where Baker Mayfield could, I don't like autocorrect either, openly and publicly admit they were going to do this trade and did it out in the open, and you had to piss off Baker Mayfield as a result. That's the problem, and that's why they're getting what they asked for right now, and that's why they should be better off having a quarterback-less roster, because any quarterback in Cleveland has become a net negative and it sets the Browns franchise back. Maybe have a quarterback-less offense. You might have to do something positive for a change. And no, I'm not giving you credit for having Joe Flacco take you to the playoffs because you're basically carried by a defense that was led by Myles Garrett. Good luck up there in Cleveland because you can probably get a quarterback, maybe Shedeur Sanders, because all signs point to Cam Ward going to Tennessee. Good luck in your ventures. Just find a way to at least put yourselves at the Bengals level in terms of running an NFL franchise, because this ain't a whole lot when you find a way to be worse than them. And that's where you guys stand right now. And a similar topic of the Browns, it's been floated around that the Browns organization is going to look at the standout Penn State defensive end Abdul. He didn't have any kind of pro days because he had some kind of injury down the stretch for Penn State. With how questionable the quarterback depth is in this year's NFL draft, I know I just teased the Browns, but if I were them, I'd really look at this. Because you talk about just pound for pound, overall players, forget the position for a minute. You could probably argue Abdul Carter is number one. Of course, it's going to be up for debate for many players and many positions. It's going to depend on how the Browns organization wants to do this, which we know they don't know how to think straight. But if they really want to do something of significance, I would draft Abdul Carter and try and make a play for Kirk Cousins, because apparently Cousins was in Cleveland for some reason, and apparently the Falcons want to move on from him so they can give the snaps to Michael Penix Jr., in one of the most weirdest situations that took place last offseason, as we all know. So I could see Abdul Carter, put him opposite Myles Garrett, and that's a heck of a 1-2 punch of the defensive edge for the Browns. You can knock the Browns for a lot of things, but when that defense can get going, especially the defensive front, it can get pretty nasty when it wants to. And you put Abdul Carter right there, that's saying something. Because everybody's talking about Shedeur Sanders. I think the guy's getting a bit of a overhyped right now. Only reason he got the hype is because he was in Colorado playing for his dad, the standout Deion Sanders. And he'll probably go somewhere in the first round. He's going to be one of those ones who drafted him is going to be reaching for him, just like maybe a guy like a Jalen Milroe, among others. But if I'm the Browns, I would go Abdul and try and make a play for Kirk Cousins. Maybe that'll get something going over there. Of course, they're still in the same division as Baltimore and Pittsburgh. But that's probably the route I go. I don't know why people over there in Cleveland are so crazed up over guys like a Shador Sanders or again guys like a Jackson Dart, among many others. Get an Abdul Carter and just go from there. Maybe get a 1-year flyer from someone like a Kirk Cousins. Because the next year's quarterback draft is supposed to be better than this one. Because after the top 3 or 4, the quarterback talent just drops down. Probably to maybe the late day 2 or early day 3. You'll probably see another solid quarterback drafted in this year's draft. That's probably the route I go. But then again, if I'm Cleveland, I would just draft Abdul Carter and just go quarterback less because any quarterback they have isn't going to work. It's been the story of that franchise since it came back in 1999. Look at the names that went through that quarterback roster over there. Sheesh. You could probably build a entire 2 NFL teams just out of the quarterbacks alone that they went through. One quick note before I dive into the boxing. Shout out to the standout Carmelo Anthony for winding up in the Basketball Hall of Fame. A lot of sparks all over the place on this one. But it's the outstanding player of the Final Four at Syracuse when they won the national title, his 1 year there. Stand out in the Olympic Games, multiple gold medals in the Olympics, and among the tops all time in the FIBA tournaments from 2007 to 2016. Well-deserved Hall of Fame recognition, and for that, he deserves it. I know his pro career didn't amount to much simply because he'd been put in bad situations in Denver, New York, and eventually in LA, which was just a mitigated disaster the year he was there. But so actually straightens the offense by getting turnovers and creating short fields. Absolutely. I agree. I agree with this. That's why I think they should draft him because good luck trying to block those 2 edge rushers if they get that. But if it were me, that's the route I go if I'm Cleveland. But the grudge up on Carmelo Anthony, his international career is pretty solid. The standout year at Syracuse, not the greatest in the NBA, but he was put in bad situations in Denver and New York and the 1 year in LA. But he does deserve the Hall of Fame bid for his career in international play and college. Kudos to him. Now to the sport of boxing and 2 historical fights, because over the next couple months, some massive history is going to be coming through this particular show, courtesy of yours truly. But this one, simply, I'm going to put it like this. It's I'm going to pull the name on this one. I can't remember it off the top of my head because this one took place 87 years ago today when Joe Louis made a successful defense of his heavyweight championship at Comiskey Field. It was basically the 3rd defense of his title. The story of this one is a tune-up before the super fight in 1938, at Yankee Stadium, the rematch with Max Schmeling. He basically took the equivalent of a tune-up when he fought the standout contender named, if I can pronounce this correctly, weird name. So I do apologize for this. It was a fellow named, a fellow named Harry Thomas. Got him mixed up with somebody else. He fought Harry Thomas at the old Comiskey Park in Chicago, basically the home of the old Chicago White Sox. Battered him in 5 rounds. Thomas was basically an unranked fighter, but gave Joe Louis a good fight for about the 2.5 rounds until Joe Louis became Joe Louis and just pummeled him, floored him 6 times in the last 2.5 minutes, which caused the referee to mercifully stop it when he got up the last time. This is brought up because this was setting up for the super fight that took place in 1938. The term super fight was never used in 1938, but for any kind of boxing historian will tell you the significance of the second meeting between Joe Louis and Max Schmeling, because Louis was determined for payback after Schmeling beat him the first time in 1936. This was in the middle of Joe Louis's super reign as a heavyweight champion of the world, 12 years, 25 successful title defenses, basically a record that nobody's going to be touching because of the political aspect of the sport, which has gone to massive governing bodies here. They call every fight a title. And of course, there's the political aspect of stripping fighters of titles or fighters vacating belts because of the corrupt governing bodies as they're run. But Joe Louis was in basically the start of this reign, because this was only his third title defense. When he won the title the year before, when he beat James J. Braddock, just pummeled him to 7 rounds, and just cast on to probably the longest and most impressive reign that's probably never going to be touched. That 12 years of 25 successful title defenses, it's going to be, at the end of the day, the most unbreakable record maybe in boxing history. Given the political aspect of it, not just the fact that no one's going to get it, there's probably a chance that it can't be touched just because of how crazy the sport is. Remember, back then, it was a one belt era where one belt, you got the one belt, you had the whole thing. And there was a time back then, the heavyweight championship of the world was the king prize in all of sports. And this is before Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Robinson came over. Joe Louis had the distinction of the greatest fighter of all time at that point. When you consider the guys he went through during his reign, we talk about 2 wins over Billy Conn, a standout light heavyweight. Of course, the rematch with Schmeling. At the back end of it, he came back to stop Jersey Joe Walcott at the 10th round and in the second of their 2 fights in the rematch of a terrible performance by Lewis in their first fight, till he basically, at that time, vacated the title, had nothing left to prove, but was forced to come back because the government was on his tail and had 2 bad losses to Ezra Charles and Rocky Marciano. But no one talks about those simply because his history was set way before that happened. When he, from 1937 to 1949, that was known as the Joe Louis era. Nobody at that time came even close. I mean, Henry Armstrong had a good run during that period, but what Joe Louis did from 1937 to 1949, nobody's touching Joe Louis because no one's touching his record. And basically, that right hand of his, when he put it on your chin, it was good night. Probably the most lethal puncher of that time. And when he got to Max Schmeling in that rematch, when he put that right hand and laid him out in the first round at Yankee Stadium, still the image of Max Schmeling's face almost turning the equivalent of 90 degrees. I mean, Lewis just put the right hand sweet on Schmeling's face. Face first goes Max Schmeling, and that's all she wrote. That is the Joe Louis legacy. I mean, the guy is probably a top 5 all-time great overall. Probably the top 2 or 3 with guys like Muhammad Ali. You could probably argue he's number 1 because of his reign, understandably so. I put him number 2 behind Ali for many reasons. But the Joe Louis legacy is basically etched in stone forever, and this one is probably never going to be touched in this or any other lifetime. Can't wait till I get to June to talk about some more of his fights, because a lot of his historical fights took place in June, and there's a lot to talk about. And another one that took place, this one was 41 years ago. This was Marvin Hagler, marvelous Marvin Hagler, successfully defending his undisputed middleweight championship against a rugged, tough Argentine named Juan Roldan. Juan Domingo Roldan. I missed out his middle name. Early on in this fight, Roldan pulls Hagler down, rolled a knockdown. He had a ticked off Marvin Hagler, who just did anything and everything he wanted to Roldan. Just shockingly how Roldan was able to stand up to what Hagler delivered was basically astonishing, because given how tough of a fighter Roldan is. But after this fight, about 2 months later, was the wipeout that Thomas Hearns had over Roberto Duran. And we had the buildup for the super fight of April 15, 1985 between Marvin Hagler and Thomas Hearns. That was what this began. Because this was the moment Marvin Hagler had fought his entire career for, the chance to be in the spotlight, to be in the chance of the main event in Vegas against an elite fighter like Thomas Hearns. It was symbolic of the hard work Marvin Hagler had to do, the hard road he had to take just to get to that point. Remember, he and Hearns had a scheduled fight in 1982, but Hearns had an injury which ticked off Marvin Hagler. And of course, after Hearns knocked out Duran in the CBS replay version, Marvin Hagler still didn't let Hearns off the hook when it came to what happened on that day. He essentially said, when you get in that ring, you're getting knocked out. And that's what he basically did. But it was this fight that took place 41 years ago in the backyard of Marvin Hagler, where he just beat down and beat up a tough, durable standoff fighter and Juan Roldan as he continued his march to greatness in the middle of the 12 successful title defenses he had, going back to when he beat Alan Minter in 1980 to when he lost it to Ray Leonard in 87. Now we talk about some of the all-time greats in middleweight championship boxing history. Marvin Hagler is up there. Some people call him the greatest. I get it. But there's a boatload of names that are in that conversation. Obviously, the top ones are Sugar Ray Robinson. No-brainer. You talk about the Raging Bull, Jake LaMotta. Who could forget his rivalry with Ray Robinson, especially the first 2 or 3 fights where they were classics until Sugar Ray Robinson just massacred him in the 6th fight in that St. Valentine's Day massacre. Carmen Basilio had the 2 great fights with Sugar Ray Robinson, the 1957 and 1958 fights of the year, each guy splitting that series. Basilio winning in 57, Robinson winning in 58. Harry Greb. A lot of people put him in the all-time great list despite no real footage. But you're talking about a guy who fought a big chunk of the second half of his career as a one-eye fighter. He's definitely in that conversation. Carlos Monzon. The record Hagler was chasing during his reign as middleweight champion, because Monzon had the 14 title defenses. Hagler didn't get to that. It was eventually broken by Bernard Hopkins in 2001 when he obliterated Felix Trinidad. But Monzon's place in history in the middleweight division is also there. Some argued he was the greatest middleweight ever for the longest time also, but definitely at least in the top 5 or 6. His record speaks for itself. Gene Fullmer was another good one. Great fights with guys like Basilio and Robinson. Dick Tiger, a top 75 all-time great fighter, probably a top 50 all-time underrated great fighter. Had a phenomenal fights with Gene Fullmer. Maybe his standout was when he went up to light heavyweight to upset Jose Torres as a 3.5-1 underdog. Definitely an all-time great, being the great Dick Tiger. And of course, Rocky Graziano and Tony Zale. Back in the mid to late 40s, an epic trilogy, almost like Gatti Ward-esque, but it's not talked about because it's way back in the 40s here. But both guys were made for each other, and their second fight was a classic. And basically, the 1947 fight of the year, Zale called the Man of Steel because of his chin, and basically it took a lot for Graziano to do what he had to do to him. But that's Graziano's Zale fights from the late 1940s, epic classics. And 1947 was basically the fight of the year and the one that stood out of the 3-fight series between Rocky Graziano and Tony Zale. Of course, you want to go more modern, Bernard Hopkins, the guy who broke the record of Carlos Monzon, basically cleaned out the division, won all the belts, the 20 successful title defenses. Maybe you could say he should have been the winner of at least one of those 2 fights with Jermaine Taylor in 2005 when he lost both of them. But can't take away the fact of his reign. Stand out. Some other guys that came through the division, more modern, maybe not stature, but some good ones. Michael Nunn, Sumbo Kalambe, Mike McCallum, James Toney, Julian Jackson, just to name several of them. Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank from the England. And they're basically known for their careers at super middleweight, but had pretty solid careers at middleweight. Iran Barkley, who can forget what he did to Thomas Hearns in 88 in the first fight, where he hit him so hard, I thought Thomas Hearns went through the canvas when he floored him. That's another good one. Ray Leonard, of course, beat Marvin Hagler, but that's basically his only fight. I can't give him credit for that. His career is more out as a welterweight. But the middleweight division, you could probably say, out of maybe the old school 8 from way back when, maybe the deepest when it comes to all-time great middleweights. And there's a lot more names than the ones I said and mentioned that belong there. But Marvin Hagler certainly is in the conversation. There's some people that call him overrated. I will not go that far because he's still not given the respect or the due he earned, because he had to do this the hard way while Leonard and Hearns were stalling him out the best way they possibly could till they finally fought him at 85 and 87 respectively. While they were stalling him out, Hagler was simply saying, next man up, I don't care who you are, I'll get you in the ring and I'll beat you. And when he, from 80 to 87, when he reigned as the undisputed middleweight champion of the world, he did just that. May God rest the soul of Marvin Hagler. To tell you the stature that Marvin Hagler has, in 2021 when he passed, you know the controversy of the Marvin Hagler-Ray Leonard fight. Ray Leonard basically said, if I have to give my victory to Marvin Hagler to bring him back to life, I do it. Tells you the respect Marvin Hagler earned. And he earned it the hard way. I mean, all fighters earn it the hard way. I mean, not saying he's the only one. All of them do. I could pile up a list of all the ones that did. But Marvin Hagler, probably for that time, did it the hardest way because the boxing intelligentsia didn't like him much for whatever reason. Never bought into his act for whatever reason. But he just basically said, I'm just going to keep plucking and plucking and plucking. And when he hit the high peak at 85, when he beat Thomas Hearns in that super fight, I mean, a real super fight followers, you know the story with that one. It was basically his pinnacle, and it basically cemented his legacy among the all-time greats. God rest the soul of the great Marvin Hagler. Actually, in the next couple of weeks, there's some Hagler history that's going to be talked about, especially one coming up in the next few days, which the fight followers know which one it's going to be. It's going to set fireworks because it's still debated 38 years later who won that particular fight. I think you guys know which one I'm referring to. I'm going to say that to Monday night because I will be the one that set the fireworks, I guess. Because here we are in 2025. Everybody's still talking about what took place in 1985 and 1987. It's crazy. I mean, people still watch it. People still talk about it. And they're still debating it. Who won? Who really won? Can't wait till Monday because I'm going to have some fun with this. And on that note, I will wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. Thank you for everyone for watching and listening today. If you guys missed any part of this show, this replay will be live on Apple, Spotify, and iHeart in a matter of minutes. Once this thing is closed, I will have the audio version uploaded. And as always, one thing I always like to conclude is saying to everybody, make self-care your number one priority in life. Take care of yourselves first before you take care of anything else. Because if you take care of yourself first, good things will come your way. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. And as always, don't let anyone treat you as a priority when they actually view you as an option. Stay true to yourself. Good things will follow. That'll do it for tonight. Hope everyone has themselves a wonderful rest of the night. Stay safe out there for those watching in Cincinnati with all the weather going on. Good night. Take care, and God bless.